Hello, hello. Welcome to the Oakland Roots YouTube channel. Today, we're making a bag. Because obviously, we make a lot of bags on this channel. Today is the first time I'm making a paid-for swoon pattern. So, we have done a couple of swoon patterns already, and they have been the free patterns. This one, you gotta pay for. I think it's like $5.95. Sometimes there's sales. Keep an eye out for that. But, you guys, it's so worth it. The swoon patterns are some of my absolute favorite patterns to work with because she writes them so well. She anticipates what problem you're going to have, and there's little tips right around those areas to kind of get you through it. So the bag we're making today is adorable. You've probably already seen it in the description of this video. It's the Carter bag. This is so stinking cute. You know, the thing is, so here, let's just side note, okay? Side note. Making bags is super fun. But you know, if you make bags, you agree, tell me if you agree or not. One of the best compliments you get when you wear a bag that you made out and about is, where did you buy that bag? Right? Because if it looks like you bought it, then it looks like a major bag maker made it. And then it's like, I made it. You know, I mean, it's just like the best feeling ever. People are going to ask you where you bought it. Okay, so this is called the Carter bag. Hi there, my name's Carter. How you doing? We've got some nice little straps on the side. I used magnetic clasps for this bag. So there's two options for closure here. You can use these magnetic snaps or you can use these press locks. I use the snaps on this bag, which is going to probably be the easier option and definitely more affordable. I'll have a link for where I get my magnetic snaps down below. It's pretty inexpensive for like a lot of them. So this is going to be the more affordable option is with the snaps. So those little snaps right there. But for today's tutorial, we're going to use press locks. Also, you can see that there's some shiny little rivets in here. So I did end up purchasing this monster right here, which is a rivet press, grommet press. I got mine from Cam Snaps. I'll have links down below for where I got this, some of the dyes I got to go with it. So that's what I used for this bag to put these nice little rose gold rivets on. But because I know not everybody has one of these, I wanted to do a more affordable option for this tutorial. So today we're going to be using these Chicago screws. So these just kind of screw in to the bag. And to go with it to make a hole, I got a hole punch. I've never used any of this stuff before, so we're going to learn together. And like I said, we're going to use the locks. So this is the locks. And I'll go through all of this in the materials portion of the video, and I'll let you know where I got everything, and I'll have links. You know I love my links because I like to know where everybody gets their stuff. I want you to know where I got my stuff. So this is the, it's just so cute. So you open it up. I've got stuffing in it, obviously, to make it poof out more. But there's just one pocket. There's only one zipper on this bag, and it's this beautiful inside pocket here. And then you've got your little strap here. Now, I will say that this strap, yeah, I think that's an okay shoulder strap size. Honestly, with the look of this bag, even though it's a little small and chunky for a messenger, like a true messenger bag, I am interested in using like a crossbody strap for it. I'm going to adjust the length of this strap just a little bit, and I'll talk about that later in the video. But I do love this design so much. So in a future video, what we're going to do is we're going to actually increase the size of the patterns for this bag and make it a crossbody, kind of bigger messenger bag, which I think is going to be really, really fun. So if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed down below so you can keep up with all the videos we're coming out. This bag is a fun one to make. Let me just say that. It looks hard. It does. I know. I mean, look at the details on this bag, but it's not that bad. There's probably about 2 areas that are like, sweat, right? Sweating, sweating, sweating. I don't think I can get through this. I'm going to walk you through those 2 areas, but I'm telling you, once you get past those tricky-ish areas, smooth sailing, all right? Smooth sailing. This is a good bag. All right, let's get started. The first thing you're going to need to do is get the pattern. I'll obviously have a link for it down in the description below. Like I said, it's between, I think it's about $5.95. It is, in my opinion, a very affordable pattern considering how much detail you get in it. You can see that it finishes at 12 inches wide, 9 inches tall, 5 inches deep. It's not a huge bag. It's not a large messenger bag, but it is a great bag for everyday use. I can put a notebook in it. You can put an iPad, your wallet, whatever you need day to day. So I think this is a very usable bag pattern. Like it says here, make sure when you print it at actual size at 100%. It's always good to use Adobe Acrobat To do this, I will have a link for that down in the description below. The pages are already numbered, and when we go through the pattern, I will be referring to what step I'm on by the number. I will not be giving you any sort of exact measurements for pattern pieces because it is a paid for pattern. Go and download the pattern and you'll know exactly where we're at. So starting on page 1, we're going to go through the list of materials. First, you're going to need 1/4 yard of exterior fabric. Now, it can be quilt cotton, it can be canvas, it can probably be cotton lycra if you're very bold. It suggests that the width of the fabric be 44 inches. So if you buy quilt cotton, you can usually buy a fat quarter. This suggests that you get 1/4 yard, which is a different size cut. So 1/4 yard is going to be about 9 inches by 44 inches wide. A fat quarter is about 18 inches by 22 inches wide. There is a difference. She does suggest 1/4 yard at 44 inches wide. I would suggest getting 1/2 yard just to be on the safe side, especially if you have a print where you kind of want a fussy cut. 1/2 yard is going to give you a lot more flexibility, and you can use your scraps to make a matching wallet or little pouch, whatever. It's better to have more than not have enough when you're making this bag. You're going to need 2/3 yard of contrasting fabric. The contrasting fabric is going to be used for the accents, the sides, and the bottom, and the handles and strap. You can see on this bag I use cork, which behaves similar to vinyl. On the bag today, I will be using a pink vinyl. This is obviously not it. You need to decide if you're going to use a quilt cotton or a vinyl because there's going to be different steps based on which one of those you choose. So at the very beginning, make sure you know. I prefer to use a vinyl or a cork for the accents because I feel like it gives the bag a little bit more durability. It doesn't crease, and by using the vinyl, I don't have to interface it with SF101, and there's a lot of interfacing already in this bag. However, a vinyl or a cork is thicker than a quilt cotton, and it will be a little bit more challenging at your sewing machine. So you need to kind of weigh your options. If you're a newer sewer who doesn't normally sew with thicker material like vinyl and cork, why don't you go ahead and try this bag out using quilt cotton the first time, and then the next time step up to vinyl or cork. Next thing you're going to need is 5/8 yard of lining fabric. 5/8 yard is an interesting amount of yardage. I don't know many quilt shops that do that. I would suggest going with like a full yard. The next thing you need is 3 yards of fusible woven interfacing. Yes, 3 yards. Like I said, there's a lot of interfacing. You're going to be using almost all of that if you are choosing cotton for your contrast. If you're using vinyl, you're going to use quite a bit less of that. But interfacing, again, is one of those things. Stock up when you see a deal because you will always need it. And when you run out, you can't make your bag. You're going to also need 1/3 yard of fusible fleece. Fusible fleece is a great interfacing that's going to provide a little bit of extra structure to your bag and a bit more firmness than SF101. All right, moving on to the hardware. You're going to need 2 press locks, which is what I'm using today. You can see it comes as 2 pieces. You press it and it opens up just like this. It also has a couple screws and a backing plate. I haven't actually used these before, so this is going to be an adventure for all of us. Or you can use 2 sets of magnetic snaps. Now you can see magnetic snaps are much more basic, much more simple to use, and much more affordable than press locks. You do whatever you feel comfortable with, but I actually prefer using magnetic snaps overall just because they are very quick to get in and out, and they work really, really well. You're also going to need 2 1-inch rectangular rings. All of the hardware that I'm using on this bag was from Emmeline Bags. I'll have a link for them down in the description below. They are based out of Canada. If you're in the US, it does take a bit longer to get the material, so the shipping is a little bit slow. But she has the best assortment of hardware, and it's all really good quality. You're going to need 2 3/4 D-rings, as well as 2 1-inch swivel hooks. These are going to be used for the shoulder strap on the bag. You're going to need a 7-inch zipper. If you're using a plastic one like this one, you can go longer. Mine is a 9-inch zipper that I'm just going to trim down when I get to that step. If you're using a metal zipper, you're going to need to use a true 7-inch long zipper. I get all of my zippers from Zip It. Totally optional are 4 medium-sized rivets. You can see on this bag, I use the rivets with my rivet press. The rivets just go through the bag. You can't see the back of it. It just offers a really, really pretty accent, but it's not necessary. It's just a detail. You can also do top stitching instead. For today's tutorial, I'm going to try out some Chicago screws. So these have the look of a rivet without actually needing the rivet press. You punch a hole in your fabric and then you just screw these together. Now, since I'm using vinyl, my hole is going to be a little bit difficult to punch, so I bought myself a mini punch set. I got all this from Emmeline Bags, and we're going to try this out together, and I'll let you know how I like it. The pattern does suggest using fabric glue. I actually don't use fabric glue when I'm making my bags, so I don't have any to show you, but if you have Beacon fabric glue, it helps hold some of the layers in place. I didn't find it necessary. Instead, I just used clips and pins, and this was enough to hold everything in place. She suggests using an erasable marking pen. I have quite a few marking tools that I like to use. This is a chalk pencil. This works really well on darker fabrics. This is a friction erasable pen. I wouldn't use this on the fabric that's going to be seen in the end. Even though you can erase it, it can come back. So this is really only used on the backside of fabrics or in areas where I know it's going to be covered. I also have this chalk marking tool, which works sometimes just a little bit better than the pencil. But actually, surprisingly, what I was using this time was this washi tape. And then, of course, it's always good to use your coordinating thread. She does suggest using a 50 weight polyester or nylon thread. I like to use a 40 weight cotton thread. I don't prefer this over what she suggests. I just don't happen to have what she suggests. So if you have just cotton thread, make sure it's a little bit heavier than a 50 weight so that it doesn't break so easily. I'll be using my Microtex needles today. These are 8012 by Schmetz. You can get these on Amazon. My cutting tools is normal. It's just a 45 millimeter rotary cutter. I have these great Kai scissors, and I do suggest having a seam ripper on hand, not because I don't have faith in your bag making abilities, but because we're going to be having to cut some small holes inside of the fabric, and the seam ripper just works really well instead of, big scissors. I also suggest using various sizes of rulers if you have them. So I'm not going to walk you through cutting out the pieces today, but when you are cutting out the pieces, having a large 24-inch ruler, a standard 12-inch by 6-inch ruler, and a small 1-inch by 6-inch ruler is really, really helpful. All right, so now let's move on to prepping. So you have a lot of fabric pieces to cut. First, I want to show you what I did not cut out for this. You have a woven snap tab. I am not using a woven contrasting fabric. I am using a vinyl, so I will not be using this template today. If you are using a woven fabric, like quilt cotton or cotton canvas, you're going to want to make sure you use this one as your snap tab instead of the vinyl version. Again, because I'm using vinyl as my accent piece, I don't need the side panel fleece. This is just going to offer some more support to the side of the bag. Vinyl or cork is going to offer enough of it. Also, because I'm using vinyl on the bottom, I don't need the bottom panel fleece. Now, on some of the pieces, it says unless you're using vinyl, you don't need to do this. This one doesn't say that, but it can be very difficult to attach the fleece to vinyl, so I'm not using fleece to the bottom panel of my bag. Let's go through all the template pieces and talk about what we are using. First, let's start with all of our contrasting pieces. You're going to need 2 handle connectors. You're going to need 2 side panels and 2 main panel accents. You're going to need 1 bottom panel. So there are additional contrasting fabrics to cut out. These are on page 2, and there are not templates provided for this, but instead just the measurements. You're going to need your handle. You're going to need 2 closure straps, 1 nice long shoulder strap. I'm just going to tell you, I increased the size of this to 30 inches long because I feel like the shoulder strap could be a little bit longer for my taste. This is just personal preference. I have a whole video talking about shoulder straps and how to adjust them. I'll have a link for that down below. You're going to need 2 strap holders, and you're going to need 2 strap connectors. Now, these are all of our contrasting pieces here. If you're using vinyl, all you have to do is cut them out. If you are using woven, you will also have to interface all of this with SF101 or Woven Fuse. When you're cutting your extra pieces of contrasting fabric, especially if you're cutting it from vinyl, cut your straps first. You can see these straps are fairly long, and if you cut your template pieces out of your vinyl first, you might not have the length left of the vinyl to make a good one-piece strap. So my suggestion is cut your straps out first and then cut out your template pieces from the vinyl. I'm only using 2 fleece templates today. I'm using the main panel fleece and the flat panel fleece. Go ahead and cut those out. I've already adhered my fleece to my panel pieces, but these are what I'm using for my bag. From the exterior fabric, you're going to need your main panels. You can see I'm using this super fun Disney print. On the back, I already have the fusible fleece adhered to it. You also need the flat panel from the main print. This also has fusible fleece adhered to the back. From the lining, you're going to need another flat panel cut. You'll need 2 zipper pockets cut out, and templates for all of these are provided. And you're going to need 4 of the lining panels cut out. Now, all of these are also interfaced with SF101 or Woven Fuse. These all need to be nice and sturdy. An additional cut on page 2 is the zipper tab. This is going to be folded and cut in half to enclose the ends of the zippers. I suggest making it 1.5 inches wide instead of 1 inch wide, because 1 inch is the size of your zipper, and if you mess this up in any way, then it's not going to cover it correctly. I suggest making it just a little bit wider than your zipper tab. So I used 1.5 inches wide, just so after I put it on, I can trim it down to size. So you can see there's a lot of pieces here. It's actually not that bad. But my suggestion for cutting and interfacing all your fabric is to do it the day before. So let's go on to the next step, which is constructing the handle. For the handle, you're going to need your handle piece and your 2 1-inch rectangular rings. Take your handle right side down, grab one of your standard size rulers and a fabric pen, and draw a line that is centered along the long part of this strap. Since we're using vinyl for the contrast, there's not going to be a whole lot of ironing in this tutorial. Instead, I'll be using clips to keep everything nice and together. Now take the bottom edge of your strap and fold it up to meet that middle line and just clip in place. And then take the top edge and do the same thing, fold it down to meet the middle. All right, now take your 2 rectangular rings and we're going to slide them on here. This is a little tricky because we have all these clips, but just unclip and move them down. They don't need to go all the way down to the middle, just about 1/4 of the way in. Now we're going to unclip the ends of the handle and put them right sides together. You want to make sure that your handle is nice and straight here. You don't have any weird twists in it. And now we're going to sew along this edge at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have it stitched together, go ahead and press this open just like so, and then fold those seams back down. We're now on page 3. So now we want to move our rings around so that they're in the right position for sewing. We want to go about 1 inch away from our seam with 1 ring. So you can just eyeball this. It doesn't have to be exact. We just want this seam to be hidden fairly well. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to flip it around so that it's right side out, and so the folded side is on the inside. Take your other rectangle ring and move it so that it's on the opposite end of the rectangle ring that's next to the seam. Just like this. So you can just kind of tug it to make it nice and flat. Now, it says you can glue these together. We can just pin it. So what I do is I just remove a couple pins and replace it with the clips that are already there. Big thing is you just want this to be nice and flat. All right, there we go. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew 1 large rectangle going along the center and the edge, about 1/8 of an inch from the sides and 1/8 of an inch in from the rectangular D-rings. So I just have a standard presser foot on here for a Bernina. This is a 1D foot. You can use a zipper foot so that you can get very close to this edge over here. I'm okay not getting crazy close to it. I'm going to start on one of the more flat parts. And again, I'm using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to use a 3mm stitch length. So take your strap and set it to the side for now. So now to grab your 2 handle connectors, and on the wrong side of each, mark a line that is 1 inch in from the longer side of the rectangle. And just like we did with this strap, fold in these edges to that midpoint. If you're using woven, go ahead and press it with your iron. Do the same for the other one. So now we're going to go and we're going to top stitch along both of the long edges that are pinned. All right, now that you have them top stitched, go ahead and fold them in half, matching the short edges together, and then slide them onto your rectangle ring on the opposite side and just pin them in place for now. Now all you have to do is go ahead and machine baste these edges down. This just makes it so that you don't have to worry about them coming apart later. I'm going to do this off camera. It's just 1/4 of an inch in from the edge, and it can be 3mm, 2.5mm, whatever you want. It's just going to keep the edges together. So your handle is finished. Go ahead and put that to the side for now. Now we're on step 3, which is the closer straps. So go ahead and grab both your closer straps. We're going to do the same thing to these that we've been doing on all of our straps. We're just going to flip them to the right side down, mark a line that is 1 inch from the long edge, which is just the center of it, and fold down our edges to meet the middle. And you're going to do this for both of your straps. So now take your closure strap and fold it in half so that the wrong sides are together and clip in place. I like to just take my clips and just kind of add both of the layers together, just like this. This is where working with vinyl is going to take you a little bit longer. So now take your closure strap so that the raw ends are up towards the top. Grab your handle so that the seam is down. And we're going to insert this in 2.5 inches from the top. So I just unpin a bit so I have a better visual. I use the grids on my cutting mat to do this. So I go 1, 2.5. All right, so the top of this is going to line up with the 2.5 inch mark. Just like that. And now this part needs to stick out just 1/2 inch. So you might have to unclip the other side so that you can kind of tuck this in better. Might be easier just to kind of put it in there and then remeasure. So 1, 2.5. Okay, so we're 2.5 down, 1/2 inch out. Now re-clip everything so that it's nice and secure. You don't want this moving around. The more crazy you are with clips here, the better it's going to stay and it's going to look in the end. All right, so now we're going to do the same with the other closure strap. So now you should have this. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to do some top stitching. We're going to top stitch along both closure straps. We're going to start at the raw edge, go all the way down, go across the folded bit edge on the bottom, and go back up the top. We're going to make sure we include these strap tabs in our top stitching. We're going to use a 3mm stitch length and 1/8 inch seam allowance. We're just going to go nice and slow down all of the edges, starting at the raw edge on the right side. Now, how your machine behaves with vinyl is totally depends on the type of vinyl you're using and the type of machine you have. Since I don't have all of the vinyl underneath the presser foot, my machine does okay. But I do have to be careful. I can feel my needle sticking sometimes. So at this point, your machine might have some problems. This is 4 layers. Well, this is 1, 2, 3. This is like 8 layers of vinyl right here. If your machine's not up to this task, you shouldn't be using vinyl on this bag because you're going to have quite a few of things like this. You can see my machine struggled a little bit in that section. All right, I like to just check it and make sure that it got that seam in there just fine. It looks okay. All right, so do the same thing with the other side. Now we're on step 4, where we're going to attach this to the flap. So grab your exterior flap so that the straight edge is pointing up. And we're going to sew on the strap unit onto the top of the flap. Okay, so the pattern suggests using the flap paper to mark a line in the center. Now I like to make my marks on the top and the bottom because that will be hidden in the seam later. I don't like to draw a line down the center. And now we're going to measure in 3 inches from that midpoint. And what I like to do here is I like to take my Choco marker and make a line that goes down just like this. And if you have a 6-inch wide ruler, your other 3-inch mark is just on the other side of the ruler. So there we go. If you're having a hard time seeing that line on your fabric, take some washi tape and line it on the inside. So the side going into the center of the bag, line up your washi tape along that line just like this and do the same for the other side. Here's my line right here. So I'm going to go into the bag. We're going to attach the straps, and if you put the washi tape on the other side, it'll end up getting sewn in, which can make it hard to remove later. All right, my washi tape doesn't stick very well, so I'm actually going to clip the washi tape down. Well, what I'm trying to do is keep a nice straight line, so when I attach my straps, those stay nice and straight. Take your handle, make sure the seam is down, and line up the raw edges with the top of your fabric and the interior vertical lines with the washi tape or your marked edge. Now this is hard if you're using vinyl because you can't actually pin this down. You also don't want to glue this down because this is meant to be loose. All right, so now when we do the other side, this is going to bow up just like that. And we attach it the same way. Raw side to top edge. Line it up against your mark, however you chose to mark it. So just to make sure you're good, their strap tab, at the top of your strap tab, it should be 2.5 inches down from the top on both sides. Those look good. And there should be about 6 inches in between them, which we are good. So just to keep it in place, we're going to go ahead and base stitch these top edges at about 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to do that off camera. It can be 2.5 millimeter stitch length. It doesn't really matter. We just want to base this down so it doesn't move around on us. Okay, so go ahead and clip your straps down and you can remove your washi tape. So now what we want to do is you pretty much just want to secure this to the flap in 2 spots. We're going to do one spot here that's going to include these strap tabs, and we're going to do another spot closer down towards the bottom. I am going to be using Chicago screws. So these are the Chicago screws, and I got this punch set from Emmeline Bags. Grab your flat panel pattern. Now on it, there are a couple of dots where this is going to go. You don't have to use rivets or Chicago screws. You can just use a stitch where you do a box and an X through it and then a single line down here. It tells you exactly what you want to do. If you are using the rivets, I poked a hole through my rivet spots so that I could line this up with my panel and then just mark on my strap where these go. And then I take my small ruler and I just make sure that they're centered. So this needs to be about right here. And this one needs to be about right here because I want them to be centered on here. All right, so let's try out this punch tool. I am going to use a smaller cutting mat to put underneath here so I don't accidentally damage this cutting mat. So I tested this out on a scrap piece of fabric, and I want to make sure that I'm using the right size die. This is not the right size, so I need a bigger. So I'm going to use the 4 millimeter punch. And I'm just going to test this out first. So I have a scrap piece of vinyl here, and I'm going to kind of layer it up a bunch. And then I'm going to hold this punch on top of my layers, and then I'm just going to hammer on top of it. Yep, that size will work, so that's good. All right, so if you want to use these Chicago screws with this punch set, I suggest using a cutting mat that you don't mind damaging because you can see it did kind of dig into my cutting mat, and you're going to need a hammer. But let's go ahead and let's do this. I am going to center this over my dot, and it does seem like I have to hammer it quite a few times. All right, so then pull it out. You can see it went through all of the layers. For the screws, you have a screw side, and you have just like a pretty side. The pretty side goes on the outside, just like this. And the screw side screws in the bottom. So just screw it together. I have my sewing machine screwdriver here, which I'm going to use just as best you can. So yeah, it's really pretty. I think this is a great option. You don't want to invest in the large cam snap. I think that this is a good option. You do have to, you know, have a disposable cutting mat and a hammer and everything, but it's not that much work. You do have to give it a good smack though. I think this can actually get out a lot of great aggression. So you can see on the bottom one, there's not as many layers, and so my screw's a little wonky. So what I'm gonna do, and this is what she suggests in the pattern too, is get some extra fusible fleece, snip a little hole in it, put it around there. This just thickens up the fabric a little bit so that it's not super loose. So let's do the same on the other side. All right, there we go. I think those look great. I think the Chicago screws are a great alternative to snaps. So grab your lining flat panel, and we're going to pin it right sides together with the exterior flat panel. That little strap in the middle might want to bug you while you're clipping. Just ignore it. I like to clip all the sides together. You can go ahead and unclip the bottom parts of your straps and just tuck those in. now you have your little flap calzone over here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna sew along the curved sides. So you're gonna leave the top open, the top flat area open, and you're gonna sew along the U shape. We're gonna sew this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the start and the stop. Alright, now you're going to go around and trim down the seam allowance to about 1/4 inch, which is just half of what it is now. No need to measure it. So you can unpin the top, and now we're just going to open it up and turn it right side out. Now you can go ahead and press this seam so that it's nice and clean. So I like to take my hands and just kind of run them along the inside of the pouch to really smooth out all of these seams. And then I'll take the iron and just press it down. Try to make sure you don't press your vinyl. You don't want that mess on your iron. This step is just going to be helpful for the next step where we top stitch. You can see that sometimes the lining side kind of wants to roll up. I don't really want the lining to be seen from the top, so I press it to try to roll the exterior a little bit over the lining. And now we're going to go top stitch this at an 1/8 inch seam allowance all the way around all 4 sides of the bag, including this long strap. The big thing is we want to make sure that we don't top stitch this down. This has to be folded up and away. If you want, go ahead and just clip it up to your strap now so that it doesn't get in the way later and you don't forget. All right, so we're going to top stitch over these top straps here along the edges and along the bottom. So now we can get these straps back down. And this is where we're at. Very, very cute. So now we're going to apply the locks. The male end of the lock is going to be centered underneath this strap. For lock installation, they do suggest using an epoxy glue like E600. I have misplaced mine, so we're going to try this. We're going to try Gutermann. So, ooh, it's got a smell to it. So just put some of this glue on the inside of your male end of your lock and then insert it exactly where it needs to go. So it needs to be centered underneath this strap. Once it's in there, we're going to take our tiny screws and screw them in place. So you can see that using different types of hardware is really fun, but it requires quite a bit of tools. Let's do the same for the other side. Get your male end. So you can see when it comes in the bag, it comes like this. There's a male end and a female end. The male end is this one. Put some glue in there. Flip the whole thing over. And put in your itty bitty screws. All right, so now we have part of our locks installed. Put the female ends and whatever other pieces you have to the side for now. All right, so grab a main exterior panel. This panel is actually going to be the back of your bag. So we're attaching the flap onto the back of the bag so that it goes over like this. So whatever panel you have that you want to be on the back side, that's the one we're working with right now. Now, orientation is key here. You need to think about which side you want the top to be. So, for example, I'm going to lay my flap on this way so that when it opens, this is the back of the bag, this is the top. So take your fabric with the print right side up and mark a horizontal line that is 2 inches down from the top and parallel to that line. Just like that. Now, we're going to pin this flap so that is exterior side down, and the straight edge is along this line that we just marked. Now you're going to want to center this on this main panel. You know it's centered because there's almost an inch from the top corners to the edges. So go ahead and pin this in place. I'm going to use actual pins this time. Now what we're going to do is we're going to sew this on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This can be kind of difficult to do if you rely on the base plate 1/4 inch marks to know where your 1/4 inch is. So I am going to draw a 1/4 inch line from the edge of my flap inwards. And that's going to let me know where I need to sew. This won't be seen, so you can use a fabric marker if you need to. So now I'm just going to sew along this line to attach this. I'm going to use a 2.5 millimeter stitch length, and I'm going to backstitch at the beginning and the end. Alright, so now you have your flap attached to the back of your bag, which is an exterior piece, just like this. This is your look right now. It's looking very cute. Alright, so the instructions here were a little confusing. So what you want to do, and it's going to be kind of challenging, is you're going to flip your flap so that it's exterior side up. But what your fabric wants to do is it wants to push this seam so that you have a crease like this. That's not the goal. It actually needs to push against the flap. So you're going to have to kind of manually mess with it. So you can see on this side, I have it right. See how the side is nice and flat right here because the seam is pushed underneath the flap. On this side, the seam is going underneath the exterior panel, and you can see this fold here. We don't want that. We do want this. So to help with that, go ahead and grab some pins and pin this down. So your vinyl is where it's going to give you the most trouble. Just pin around it. Just make sure that the seam is underneath the flap and everything is nice and flat. So now we're going to go and we're going to top stitch along the flap side 3/8 of an inch away from this seam. If you need to, use a chalk pen and mark that 3/8 of an inch top stitch right now. This is where a smaller ruler is going to come in handy so you can get around that vinyl. And we're only going to top stitch on the flap. We're not going to worry about the sides. All right, congratulations. You have a big chunk of the bag already done. So now we're going to move on to the front main panel. All right, so go ahead and grab your main panel accents. You have 2 of them. And on the wrong side, we're again going to draw a midpoint line. This is going to be 1.5 inches from one of the longer sides. So go ahead and fold up the longer sides to that mid line, just like we've done previously. Do the same for the other accent. Once you have those pinned, then go ahead and grab your strap holders and mark a line that is 1/2 inch in from the long edge. We're going to do the same thing to these tiny pieces here. And we're going to fold the long edges to meet that midpoint. Yeah, these get pretty tiny here. So now we're going to go to the machine and we're going to just top stitch these strap holders. So now you have your strap holders ready to go. You're going to fold about 1/4 inch on each side. And this is pretty much just to make like a crease. We're not sewing them just yet. We're just going to fold them. Okay, now grab your other main panel. Remember, this is going to be the very front of your bag. Now we're going to mark a line in the very middle. So your main panel template piece has a lot of information that we're going to use for this part. So you can just line that up and mark a line for the midpoints. So now we're going to go 2 3/4 inches in from this piece and mark a line. So 1, 2 3/4. I just line up my 2 3/4 mark on the top and my 2 3/4 mark on the bottom. And then I use that to draw my line. So we're going to go on both sides of this. Okay, now we're going to do the same on the other side, 2 3/4 in, and then draw our line. If you have a light colored fabric, this part's actually kind of difficult. You're going to need to use some sort of like a washi tape or a blue chalk pen, something like that. So now take one of your main panel accents and we're going to just place it along that line. So it's going to go on the outer sides of that line. So for this part, it's going to go on the left side of the line. And then I just pin it to the top and the bottom, like that. So now we're going to go 3 inches from the bottom and mark a line. Now, take one of your strap holders and you're going to wrap it around right at that line. So I like to go just beneath it so that we don't really see that. Now, your strap holder is going to bow a bit, so don't try to make it totally flat. This has to be able to hold the strap from your top going into it. I will say this part right here is a little tricky when you're using vinyl. Try to make sure that that is level. I'll measure about 3 inches from each side. You want the bottom of the tab to be 3 inches. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew a top stitch 1/8 of an inch from each side. We're just going to go one vertical line and another vertical line. We're going to make sure we sew down this, but we make sure it stays bowed. All right, we're going to do the same with the other one. So we're just going to line it up along the outside of that white line. When this point, it's going to be on the right side. Now these are spots where if you were using fabric glue, you could go ahead and glue this down so that you don't have to worry about it wobbling around so much, since we're going to sew it down anyways. To make it easier to put on the strap holder and so that you don't have to worry about anything being seen later, go ahead and line up your 3-inch mark with the bottom and run it alongside your strap and make a mark right on the edge. Okay, because that's going to be covered up in the stitches. Go ahead and re-pin if you need to. Do the same on the other side. I just lift up the clips, put my ruler underneath them, move the clip that's at the 3-inch mark if there is one, and then just make a mark just like that. So now I know the 2 spots my strap needs to go, and then this will be covered up whenever I sew. And this will allow you to also mess with it at the machine, because when you're at the machine, this thing kind of slides around, and this will let you move it and then move it back where it needs to be without getting confused. So for example here, I'm just going to pin one side of the strap holder and then I'm just going to keep the other side clipped at 1/4 of an inch but not connected to my strap, and I'll sew this one down first and then I'll add this on. So I'll show you. So I'm going to make an adjustment here. I'm going to pin my strap holder on the left side because I do like to sew the side that is against that chalk line first, since that chalk line lets me know where my straight edge is. So I'm going to pin this on to the left side and stitch this side down first, and then when I go to stitch this side down, I'll pin this on, and I'll show you why. I try to keep as much clipped as possible while I'm doing this. Alright, so I keep an eye on my chalk line and my edge to make sure it stays along that chalk line. Now once you get to this strap holder, your presser foot is going to try to push it out of the way. So you have to go slowly here and then stop right when you get there and lift up your presser foot a little bit so that you can get this underneath it. If you just try to keep going, that presser foot's just going to push your strap holder all the way down, which can be extremely frustrating. And then again, just keep making sure you're lined up with your chalk line and continue on the end. Now you can see here our strap holder is still not clipped on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my mark and I'm just going to line up my strap holder at that mark and clip it on. Now I'm not wrestling with this at the machine. So again, once we get here, lift up your presser foot a bit to make sure you get your strap holder underneath it and then sew over it. All right, now it's time to attach either your other magnetic strap or, for me, our lock. The instructions will have suggestions on where it should go. So it says press lock placement here. So the instructions for my washer suggest using Peltex to help installation here. I don't have any Peltex right now, so I'm just going to use scrap pieces of vinyl for this part. This lets us know where our lock placement needs to go. You can see it's 3 inches from the top, so I'm just going to measure 3 inches from the top and make a mark just like that. Now here is my female part of my lock and here is the installation guide. So the distance between these for me is 2 open spaces, a dot, and another open space. So I'm going to line up my mark with where I want this top to go, right here, and then I'm going to do my dot, and then I'm going to skip another space and mark a mark here. So these are where I'm going to make slits to insert this. So I'm going to use my seam ripper, and I'm just going to make a couple slits through all of the layers of fabric. Nice and slow. Don't go crazy here and end up slicing your whole panel in half. So I should be able to slide this in. There we go. And now to provide a little bit of extra durability, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to cut off a piece of scrap vinyl and make the same marks. Make the same little slits in it. Put that over my prongs. And then place this over everything. And then now push down the prongs over the washer. There you go. There is one lock. So we're going to do the same with the other one. All right, now your front panel is looking good to go. Let's work on the side panels now. So grab your strap connectors, and we're going to make a midpoint line again. This time it's going to be 3/4 of an inch from the edge, from the long edge. Fold down your ends to meet that midline. Now grab your D-rings and insert them so that they are rounded side on the flat side of your strap connector. This part, attaching this to the side panel, is one of the more difficult parts in my opinion. You're going to take both of these end tabs and have them meet in the middle. You can eyeball this, but you're going to fold up one, have it meet in the middle, and then you're going to do the same with the other. Fold it down, have it meet in the middle, except the D-ring is going to go in the crease of either one of those. So wherever it wants to go. So you see you have your D-ring in the crease and you have your two pieces with meeting in the middle. We're going to top stitch this onto a side panel. It gets tricky, so we'll work through it together. So now grab your side panel, and your template for your side panel is actually going to tell you where this needs to go. See, it says right here, strap connector placement. It's going to be centered right over that. So I suggest marking a line, not entirely from the top to the bottom of this, but just most of it, so you have a center line here, which can be covered up by this. The D-ring needs to be up on the top, and then just center this over that. So since I'm working with vinyl, I can't really pin this in place, which means I'm going to have to eyeball this at the sewing machine. So whatever extra things I can use to help me see what I'm doing, I'm going to need. Try to just put one pin, one clip on each side. Center it where you want it. So my washi tape wasn't quite sticky enough, so I'm going to use just some regular Scotch tape. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of lay it how I think I want it to be in the end. Like I said, I have my center line here, so I'm centering the top and the bottom over it. And then I'm going to use my tape to make a line on the bottom. And I'll use another piece of tape to make my line on the top. Okay. Now you can go ahead and make a whole frame if you want. Take another piece of tape. Unclip it for a moment. We just want to know where to sew it when we're at the machine, because at the machine things get twisted around and it's hard to see that it's not quite straight. So this helps with that since we cannot pin it because we're using vinyl. All right, so now I have a marked off area that gives me an idea of where this needs to go. So as I'm sewing it, I just make sure it's within my box. So let's go to the machine and do this. So I do suggest using a zipper foot here because we are going to get kind of close to this. I am using a 3mm stitch length, and we're going to do about 1/8 of an inch. The first stitch I like to make with this is along the D-ring. So I make sure it's all lined up. All right, so now the D-ring is attached. Now I'm going to go from the bottom around to the top. I backstitch a lot here. And then bring it all the way up to that first stitch line. This is where having a matching thread is nice because it can just be hard to keep it clean here. Okay, and then for the last seam, I just go from that corner and I just go up towards the D-ring. So now you have it attached. Go ahead and do the same thing for the other D-ring. So now we have most of the accents and details done. Now it's time to construct the bag. Take one of your exterior main panels and take your contrasting bottom panel and lay them right sides together so the bottom panel is lined up with the bottom of the exterior main panel. Pin these together, and now we're going to sew these together at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. Open this up, and then we're going to top stitch along the bottom panel with the seam pressed against the bottom panel. We're going to top stitch this at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So now we're going to do the same thing with the other exterior main panel. You can see your other exterior main panel has the flap on it. We're just going to lay the bottom piece right side down to the exterior piece and clip their bottoms together. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to flip it up and we're going to sew our 1/8 inch top stitch with the seam allowance against the bottom of the bag. I'm going to do that off camera. So now we're going to prep the bag a little bit for the final steps. You're going to want to fold the top edge of both exterior main panels down towards the lining a 1/2 inch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a 1 inch mark along the top. So I'm going to do that on both of the exterior main panels. And then I'm going to fold the raw edges of the top of the exterior main panels down to meet that line. And you can take this to the iron and press it. Fold down the raw edge to meet your marked line, and then just press. Don't press the vinyl though. Now, I like to use clips to just kind of clip this vinyl down for me. We're really just trying to get a crease here. Now mark the same 1 inch lines on your side panels, on the wrong side of your side panels. And then go ahead and pin the raw edges down to that mark for the side panels. So now we're going to put together our exterior bag entirely. So make a mark on the midpoint of both ends of your bottom panel. Use your side panel template to make a mark for the midpoint of your side panel. And lay your side panel right sides together against the bottom part. Pin those marks together. Take your side panel top corner and your main panel top corner, right sides together. Pin those corners together. You just go along and pin the sides all the way around this half of the U shape. This can get a little tricky, which is why you should go about inch by inch. You need nice, close clips. So this does take some massaging, okay? It might not line up perfectly. Try to remember you're going to be doing a pretty big seam allowance. There's lots of room for error here. Just do the best you can. If you have to unpin and repin and move the fabric around a little bit, that's totally normal. All right, now let's do the same for the other side. Grabbing the top corner with the top corner of the main panel, right sides together. So now we're going to take this to the machine and we're going to sew along the U shape, not the top edge, just the U shape where we have all the clips at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you start feeling frustrated at this step, let me just reassure you that this is one of the more challenging steps of the bag. I mean, this might be the most challenging step of the bag, in my opinion. It's normal to feel frustrated here. I'm going to backstitch at the very beginning and the very end. And then I'm just going to go nice and slow around with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and a 2.5 mm stitch length. So when you get to these curves, you'll notice, especially if you're using vinyl, the fabric likes to kind of slip out. Just go nice and slow and keep tugging that bottom layer so that it meets. The nice thing is this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so that does give us some wiggle room here, where if we don't get it exactly lined up, we're not going to completely miss the edge of the fabric. Keep smoothing it out as you go. So now you're just going to go around and you're going to trim down your seam allowance to 1/4 inch. After you get that done, go ahead and flip your bag to the right side out. This is what we're going to need it to be later. And, you know, putting those sides on was such a challenge. We deserve a little reward. We should be able to see the fruits of our labor. Oh yeah, that is a cute, cute bag. All right, so put this to the side for now. So go ahead and grab your zipper tabs. What you can do is just fold the whole thing in half once, short ends together, press, open it back up, fold the other short ends to meet the middle press, and press those down. We're just making a nice end tab for our zipper. Do the same with the other zipper tab. Now attach these onto the ends of your zipper by first just pinning them on or clipping them on. They should be wider than your zipper. We can trim those down. If you left it at 1 inch wide, then it will be the same width of your zipper. So once you have the zipper tabs attached, go ahead and trim off any excess you have on the sides. Like I said, if you made yours wider than the zipper, you should have it overhang just a little bit. Now grab your 4 lining panels and draw a 1/2 inch line along the top of the panel. Take your iron and press down that top strip to make a 1/4 inch fold. You're going to do this for all 4 of your lining panels. Next, we're going to grab the lining panel template, and that's going to show us where to mark our darts for the lining panels. So place this on the back of your lining panel, and I like to poke a hole right at that corner of the dart so that I can use my pen to make a dot on the back of the panel, and then I'll mark the ends of those dotted lines on the side of the lining panel. Now I just take a small ruler and I connect the dots. I'm making this triangle shape on the back of my lining panel. You're going to do this for the rest of the corners. There's going to be 7 more corners for this. Just flip it over and once again place your fabric pen into that dot. Mark the ends of the dart on the side of the panel and draw a line using a straight edge. Now do this for the remaining panels. Once you have all of your darts marked, take the lining panel right side together and fold it so that the 2 lines meet. And it's best to just look at the edge of your fabric and match up those ends. The point should be right on the fold. Take a clip and clip the dart right sides together. Do this for the remaining 7 darts of your lining panels.
Once you have all of your darts pinned, we're going to just sew along the straight line. I'm using a 2.5mm stitch length. I make sure I backstitch at the beginning and the end of every single dart. Do this for the remaining 7 darts. To finish our darts, all we have to do is just clip off that excess corner. We just want to leave it at about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, not too big. Now we're going to attach the zipper. Take your lining panel piece and you'll see that there's a zipper mark on the panel. Use that to mark on your lining panel the placement of the zipper. Take your zipper so that it is right side down, meaning zipper pulled down, and pin it right where you marked the lining panel. It should fit between those lines exactly. Clip the rest of the zipper in place. Now we're going to sew along the zipper at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance using a 2.5mm stitch length only along the zipper tabs and the zipper. Now grab your 2 pocket pieces and lay one of your pocket pieces right side down against the zipper and against the lining panel. You see you have little notches. Those should line up perfectly with the zipper tape so that the zipper tabs are just peeking out the sides. I like to open my zipper about halfway before I put this on. It just makes sewing it on later a little bit easier. Go ahead and clip this into place. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this on at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance using a 2.5mm stitch length. We're going to sew only along the zipper panel. So you can see I sewed that on. Now we're going to press the lining and zipper panels wrong sides together. Lift up your pocket and just kind of smooth it out around the zipper. You can use an iron here to press this down to give it a nice clean edge. This is going to help us with top stitching. We're going to top stitch along this edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance using a 3mm stitch length. So now grab another lining panel and we're going to mark the zipper placement once again just like we did on the original lining panel. This will be the other lining panel that the zipper attaches to. Take your zipper so that it's right side down and line it up between those marks on the second lining panel. Again, it should fit perfectly between the marked lines. And then just clip it in place. Now we're going to sew these two together at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance using a 2.5mm stitch length. Now take your second pocket panel and just clip that onto the zipper. We're going to sew along this seam at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And now we're just going to press it open, wrong sides together with the lining, just like we did on the other side of the pocket. We're going to run this through the machine and we're going to give it a top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance with a 3mm stitch length, just along the zipper. So now that we have everything top stitched, we're going to finish off the pocket. Clip your pocket panels right sides together all the way around. Now I find this easier to sew if I start at the middle of the bottom of the pocket and work my way up towards the zipper on each side. So I'll start in the middle, backstitch, go up all the way to the zipper, backstitch there, and then again start in the middle, up the other way, up to the zipper.
So now you have your zipper attached to your lining panel and the zipper pocket. Now, take one of your lining panels that does not have a zipper attached and lay it right side down with a lining panel that does have the zipper attached. Now pin these together, right sides together. I like to line up the darts and line up the top corners and then pin in between. All right, now that you have your linings pinned together, we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance only on the U shape. So from the top all the way around the bottom and up the top again. We're not gonna sew along the top straight edge right here. Make sure you backstitch at the very beginning and the very end of your U. Okay, so now you have it all stitched together. We're going to trim the seam allowance down to 1/8 inch. Now repeat these steps with the lining on the other side. Okay, so now you can refold your 1/4 inch on the top back down. And there you go, your lining is complete. So now we're going to attach the lining to the exterior of the bag. Grab your bag with exterior side out, just like this. Drop in the lining into the inside. Lining should be lining side in, just like this. So you kind of have an idea of what your finished bag looks like. Your edges should still be folded. So on your exterior, make sure you fold down that 1/2 inch. And on your interior, you fold down that 1/4 inch. And then match up the folded corners. Since my sides are vinyl, I like to just keep a clip on them like that. So just do all 4 corners. So now we're going to pin the lining and the exterior together between the corners. So pretty much we're just going to leave the side panel seams open for now, and we're just going to pin between here all the way around the bag. And you might want to use a lot of clips for this just to really help hold it in place. Now do the other side as well. So now you have your front and back seams pinned down. So now on the right side of the side panel, you're going to mark 1 1/4 inch from each seam into the side panel. So this is where washi tape is pretty helpful. Grab yourself a small piece, 1 1/4 inches in, and just apply the washi tape. There you go. Do the same on the other side. Go ahead and repin that corner if you had to unpin it to measure. All right, so we know that these on the outside here is our stitch marks. Now we're going to go and do the same on the other side. So go ahead and clip your lining to the exterior on the side panels up to the outer part of these tapes. Okay, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to start on one side of our tape and go all the way around the front until we get to the other side of our tape. This is our 1 1/4 inch mark all the way to the other side 1 1/4 inch mark. We're going to use a 3mm stitch length and 1/8 inch top stitch seam allowance. We're going to do the front this way and we're going to do the back this way. So pretty much the space between the outer edges of these tapes is not going to be sewn. Everything else is going to be sewn. So make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end of each line. So this is where it's really good if you haven't already done so. Take off your extended table for your sewing machine so you have the smallest area around the needle as possible. This is going to allow you to curve your bag around it as you go. This can get kind of tricky. Just go nice and slow. I like to pin that middle part out of the way first and then get it under my needle. And you're just going to have to kind of mess with it with your hand as you go. So do a couple stitches and then backstitch. And then continue on with 1/8 inch top stitch. You might have to lift up your presser feet when you go over some of these vinyl accents. All right, now do the same for the other side. right, so here's where we're at. Go ahead and trim off any extra strings you have. Take off your washi tape if you used it. Okay, so you'll notice you have these open sides over here by the zipper. Go ahead and pinch in your side panels together like that, tight together like that, and then pinch your lining panel just like that. What we're going to do is we're just going to sew a seam from this top stitch from the zipper over to this top stitch for the exterior of the bag. The same for the other side. Okay, so this step is actually fairly challenging because you have a lot of folds here that don't want to go together. You need to keep your side panel in the seam with the lining. It wants to kind of go down like that, but you're going to have to make sure you keep it upright, just like that. So I suggest getting it under the needle and then adjusting your layers. Make sure you backstitch as you go over it. And if you have to adjust while you're doing just these few stitches, go ahead and do that. Make sure you're lined up at 1/8 of an inch. Go ahead and backstitch. You can see I'm kind of keeping it pulled taut while I do it. All right, the last step in the pattern is just to make the shoulder strap. Now this is going to be very simple considering how much work you've already done. So just like we've done many times before, we're going to mark the middle of this lengthwise. Go ahead and measure 2 inches in from one of the longer sides and draw yourself a line all the way down the strap. Now I'm using a 30-inch long strap because I wanted my strap a little bit longer. You could even go longer than this and do a crossbody strap. If you're interested in an adjustable strap, I'll have a link down below for a video where I discuss making an adjustable strap for bags. You can use that here. Now take the long edge and fold it up to meet that midline and clip in place. Do this along the entire strap on the opposite end as well. Now fold this strap together one more time so that you have just one nice long skinny strap with no raw edges showing anywhere. So now we're going to top stitch along both edges, the double fold and the single fold side, at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance with a 3mm stitch length. I like to sew on the double fold side first and then the single side fold. Since we're working with vinyl, folding the ends in is a little different for us than if we were working with cotton. Honestly, I like to go about 1 inch in. So I use my inch ruler and I just fold it around that inch. Now take your swivel hook and place it in the fold, just like that. Clip it down. And do the same for the other side. Just make sure you fold the strap on the same direction on both ends. So that way you don't have any of the raw edge showing on the outside. Now you can double fold this where you fold this in again to hide this end seam. My machine can't handle that. So one fold is honestly enough because the side of the strap that you're going to see is this side. I'm okay with this being exposed just like that. So now let's take this to the machine and I'm going to use my zipper foot this time. A zipper foot just lets me get really close to that swivel hook without actually touching it. And then again, I'm just doing a top stitch, which is a 3mm stitch length, getting close to it, but not right on top. And I do back stitch at the beginning and the end. There we go. Now do the same for the other side. And there you go. Your strap is done. Just trim off those extra strings and your bag is complete. Woo! All right. That was a trip. Okay, I'm just saying we started in the morning and now the sun is gone. It is the evening. My glass of wine is waiting for me. It took me about 5 hours of dedicated work. It might take you a little bit more, it might take you a little bit less, but it is a project that does require some time. So let's look at the bag. Gorgeous. Look at you. Look at you. You are just beautiful. I mean, look at those accents. Oh, this is a cute bag. Okay, so like I said, I made this strap a little bit longer. This is a 30-inch strap. Let me if I can get it. So you can see if I wear the bag with this strap, it hits me like right at my stomach. So this is kind of a more comfortable length. Here is my cork bag that we made. And using the strap suggestions they have, it kind of comes like right at my armpit. So I kind of like this length better. So this is a 30-inch strap versus the shorter strap in the pattern. For this bag, we figured out how to use Chicago screws, and we also did snap closures, these cute little locks, which are just adorable. I used rainbow hardware all over, bright pink sparkly vinyl, the craziest Disney print. This bag is going to a very special person who is going to adore it. So I highly suggest this bag. I think it's a super, super cute bag. It is challenging in that it takes time, okay? You're not gonna probably whip this up in an hour. If you can, you need to be selling them and making some money off of that, because that is a talent that should be rewarded. But it is such a cute, cute bag. The size is really good. You can put, like I said, you can put an iPad in here. You can put a notebook. You can put your phone, your wallet, all your basic stuff. So this is a great like everyday bag. So I hope this encouraged you to go and try to make the Carter bag. It is one of my new favorite bag patterns. You can find it on the Swoon website, which I'll have a link for down below. If you have any questions or anything, make sure you leave them in the comments down below. You can also email me at jessica@oaklyroots.com. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. It means a lot to me to see all of you guys interacting and giving me ideas and showing me pictures of what you make. Make sure if you share any of this on social media, you use the hashtag OakleyRootsToots. That's what I'm checking all the time to keep up with you guys. You can also tag me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm at OakleyRoots. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye!